Hello and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from D&D 5th edition, all while giving a small but quickly digestible history about them. Together we'll go over their history within the game, how they utilize in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. This week we will be covering the Forgotten Realms goddess of pain and agony, Loviatar. Having been a part of the game since the first edition, her other epithets include the Maiden of Pain, the Willing Whip, the Scourge Mistress, and the Patroness of Torturers. Her holy symbol was a 9-stranded whip with barbed strands, otherwise known as a cat o' nine tails. She wields only the domain of death in the base lore, and her worship consists mostly of masochists, sadists, torturers, and the most ruthless of the realm. Loviatar was described to appear as a slender, beautiful woman with platinum blonde hair, dressed in garish, spiked black leather or dresses made of revealing white silk, emblazoned with all manner of chains. Other details include a cold yet soft voice, a sinister grace to her movements, and the offhand fact that her blood was black in color and syrup-like in viscosity. Not sure why that detail is particularly important, but I'm sure some dungeon masters will find some use for it in some way. As a goddess of pain, suffering, and torture, Loviatar was naturally cruel, calculating, and carried a curious and experimental nature regarding the concept of pain, controlling the domain of not only just physical agony, but mental and spiritual as well. She was a master of ruining bravery and instilling fear just as much as she was with wielding a knife, and Loviatar herself was believed to be incapable of feeling emotion or physical pain herself, possibly even extending to other emotions such as love and fear. Any attack, damage, or hurt inflicted upon her was just met with laughter, verbal humiliation, and fear as she sometimes walked directly into the path of harm. This doesn't mean that she's infallible, however, as Loviatar's understanding of mortals leads her to believe them to be innately selfish, which could often leave her plots vulnerable to acts of either heroic or otherwise self-sacrificing nature. Regarding her relationships with other gods and entities, Loviatar has served as a lesser god agent under the gods Baal, Shar, and Bane, serving as queen and consort for the last one and having a bitter rivalry with the goddess of poison, Talana, sometimes going as far as to torture and belittle her during their time together. In terms of her enemies, the gods Eldath, Lyra, and most importantly, Ilmater, who we incidentally covered in a previous video, are all very much on her list of people to knock down, capture, and torture. She despises the idea of a person being rewarded without any suffering endured to earn it, and Ilmater's ethos of taking on the suffering of all people in the world utterly sickens her. Now, Loviataran priests of all genders were often found wearing sets of leather armor and apparel like steel-toed boots, chokers, spiked gauntlets, as well as wearing scant red or black clothing that revealed their often self-inflicted wounds for the world to see. Blood was also very much more easily hidden with black and red vestments that they wore. Loviatarans often wielded sharp serrated or saw-edged daggers, swords, and whips, with higher-ranking cultists wielding the true 9-tailed whips and spike armor ranging from simple studded leather to outright breastplate. Regarding Loviatar's tenets, her strongest belief is that suffering makes one strong and wise to the viciousness of the world, and to advance, one must make others suffer so they may serve as the stepping stones for one's own greatness. Beauty, intellect, wealth, and status were all but useful attributes for the distribution of pain, and the biggest goal of any Loviatar worshipper was the ability to fully understand someone's motivations, thought processes, traumas, prejudices, and biases without falling victim to empathy for them. Learning these attributes was what would let a Loviataran inflict the maximum amount of pain on their subjects, and they reveled in moments of realization, heartbreak, and betrayal just as much as they did in physical torture of their enemies. Furthermore, worshippers of Loviatar were encouraged to hunt, capture, and kill those who followed the faith of Ilmater, as he was her eternally sworn enemy. And to successfully capture and torture a follower of his to death was often the greatest form of worship a priest of pain could do. In a more socially acceptable setting, Loviatar worshippers would often run BDSM dens that allowed people to explore the concept of pain and pleasure in a less zealous way, with these operations serving as both places to recruit new faithful and secure funding for the church itself. Incidentally, Loviatar worshippers often engaged in self-flagellation, doing so in the morning while praying for their spells and believing that the more damage that they did to themselves, the stronger magic they would receive. In terms of rituals, some of the ones that Loviataran priests practiced include the Rite of Pain and Purity, a ritual performed at the start of each season involving followers dancing on glass, thorns, or barbed wire, whilst being whipped and jeered at by higher-level Loviatar cultists. They also performed a smaller ceremony every 12 days known as the Passing of the Candles, which involved followers passing their bodies through the flames of candles, suffering a variety of many small burns. Additionally, in times of war, priestesses of Loviatar would rend their cheeks and shoulders with their nails in order to evoke more powerful magic from their goddess, which can bring an interesting exploration of blood magic in relation to Loviatar's clerical rites. Furthermore, the following titles of the clergy's ranking from highest to lowest can be listed here for you guys to use in your games, should you wish to give an NPC a high rank in the cult or even have a player try to ascend to one of these seats. There also existed a very special arm of the Loviatar church known as Pains, a group of people said to travel from place to place as pilgrims while carrying out the will of their goddess, functioning as traveling envoys, agents, and inquisitors. Pains were often held in very high regard by other faithful, but they would still remain loyal to the ranking hierarchy of any temple that they visited, many of which are listed below as existing within the Forgotten Realms campaign setting itself. While there exist no knightly orders of the Maiden of Pain, I do have a couple of ones I've developed that I will include once I get to my DM resources segment of this video. There is, however, the Disciples of the White Rod, a monastic order to Loviatar named in honor of an artifact gifted to their founder from her, with members practicing an extensive meditative and martial arts known only as the Way of Transcendence, which I can only imagine is meant to transform an individual and aid them in their ascension towards a higher state of being by the use of pain. Not much else is known about this order other than the fact that they're small in number, practicing the distribution of pain with only their fists, while also being known to use white-gripped nunchucks and staves as their signature weapons, obviously an emulation of the White Rod. Now, as I'm sure as many of you can tell, Loviatar's worship and clergy runs a spectrum between a deity dominatrix and an introspective entity who believes that higher ascendance can only be accomplished through suffering. And while the former can be appealing to the average group of horny bards who want to be stepped on, I personally prefer the latter depiction. To me, it offers a truly alien and almost ill sense of thinking, that suffering and pain can be what brings the true strength and beauty of a person out into the open, as well as being able to understand that to get ahead in life, there are people who you will need to crush and step on in order to rise to the place that you want to be at. It especially makes more sense when you remember that Loviatar served as the consort to Bane, the god of strife. As such, whenever I'm running Loviatar at a table, I present her less as a leather-clad mommy and more of a truly disturbing force wearing a pretty manipulative face. She draws people in, sinks her teeth into them with curiosity and intricate machinations, and transforms them into scions of utter pain and agony on those that she wishes to see suffer. Despite this, however, Loviatar is one of the few deities that I personally believe doesn't wish to gain more power, or at least that's not her most important goal. For Loviatar, there will always be pain in the world to draw from, even if she isn't the direct cause of it, which means she will always have a steady current of power that offers her a leeway to experiment and truly understand her domain of pain. She's an experimenter and an explorer, always seeking new ways to torment and torture others, as well as new people to convert. Due to her focus on pain and experimentation, there are all manner of creatures that could work under Loviatar's tenets. For instance, a group of pain-maiden mind flayers could seek to study how mortals feel and understand suffering before devouring their minds to feel the effects. Or a group of murderous redcaps could emerge from the blood of a Loviatar cultist who was slain within the Feywild. You can even have a noble who seeks to brand Loviatar as an icon of debauchery and lust over that of a pain-obsessed torturer, all in order to paint a better picture of her for the public and offer more salacious experiences for the brothels and whorehouses that he controls. Bottom line is, people who worship Loviatar don't always have to be scar-covered cultists in caves seeking to bathe in the blood of maidens. Adaptation is very important for survival, and the domain of pain is versatile enough for Loviatar to bend and twist it to suit her audience. Now, in terms of ways that you guys can align the various different classes and subclasses in D&D to fit with Loviatar's tenets, here are a couple examples. For Artificers, Loviatar's keenness on experimentation and invention makes Artificers a unique sort of class when it comes to interacting with her. An alchemist artificer can experiment with pain-inducing herbs and drugs on himself or the victims he captures, and an armor artificer can infuse spikes into his armor in a sort of Iron Maiden-like devotion to the goddess. Barbarians, being hit point tanks and damage dealers of any party, are always cutting down swaths of enemies and wading through the midst of battle. The pain of the wounds that they suffer are almost always deadened by their rage, so I could see almost all barbarian subclasses matching the Maiden's energy. If I do need to get specific, Zealot is quite obvious, but there are a variety of ways you could approach this. Now, when it comes to bards, on the other hand, they can take a more emotional or psychological approach in regards to pain and hurt. College of Whispers bards can mire and pierce the mind with horrid visions, and the College of Swords, of course, could take a more literal approach, with scarred dancers wielding sharpened nine-tails whilst methodically mocking the cries of their enemies in song. Now, for clerics, while Loviatar's only canon domain is death at the current moment, I would argue on the behalf of the domains of war, trickery, and even forge. War clerics of Loviatar would seek to unleash pain upon her enemies, forsaking the nuance and refinement of torturous study in favor of good old-fashioned violent zealotry. Trickery clerics can call upon her more manipulative and deceitful side, tricking their prey and playing people against one another so as to sow discord and ruin relationships, without having to distinctly draw blood themselves. And lastly, and you guys are going to find this quite hilarious, a forge cleric can be the one who literally creates the instruments of pain that the faithful use, from wrapping leather for whip to forging spiked armor, to even creating chains and collars and harnesses to a refined, digestible style without sacrificing any of its protection. I think I'm going to save that character concept for whenever I get a chance to play. Now, druids are a little bit tougher, as most subclasses are keen on fostering life and the natural order. Yet still, a moon druid can certainly find divine purpose on the hunt for prey whilst in the shape of an animal, and the passing of the candles ritual we mentioned earlier could be an excellent gateway for creating a wildfire druid, who literally heals and harms with the flames that they've grown to love and appreciate so deeply. For fighters, a rune knight could carve the runes into his very skin in devotion to Loviatar. Echo knights can channel the suffering of their echoes when they're dispelled as pledges to their goddess, and battle masters and champions can simply be very good at old-fashioned killing. For monks, the aforementioned Disciples of the White Rod are a great organization for your PC Way of the Long Death, Open Hand, Shadow, or Kensai monks to join and climb the ranks of. Long Death and Open Hand are self-explanatory. The Shadow can focus on misdirection and taking advantage of the weakness of their foes, and the Kensai can study the way of the serrated blade, devoted to the art of flaying and slicing their enemies to paint a beautiful, bloody picture. For paladins, those who swear an oath of vengeance can embody the Maiden's utter relentlessness when it comes to the pursuit of eternal agony. Conquest paladins can step on their foes and fulfill that dominant role of Loviatar's faith, and zealous oathbreakers can forsake their pledges made on their crusades in favor of the indulgence of pain upon their enemies. Now for rangers, all rangers are hunters at heart, and hunters are always the bane of the hunted. As such, suffering need not only be relegated to the sapient and the sentient. Animals and monsters alike can feel the terror of being exterminated in the most painful, anxiety-inducing ways possible, with rangers devoting their chase, hunt, choice of favorite foe, and kills that they make to the Maiden of Pain. In particular, Horizon Walkers can relentlessly slay fiends, celestials, or the Fae and display their corpses as omens to turn back, and Swarm Keepers can bestow a slow death upon their targets by feeding them to their swarms. Rogues of any sort can embody the concept of pain, suffering, and loss, from a thief stealing the last mementos of a poor victim's lost loved one, to phantom rogues literally peeling pieces of their enemies' souls to use as trinkets in the future. And then there is the classic assassin, educated in the ways of agony, torture, poison, and the like. Now, sorcerers have a smaller pull regarding the subclasses. Aberrant mind sorcerers can easily slither into the minds of their victims and pry out their fears, and wild magic sorcerers can struggle with the random, harmful effects of their spells. Being unable to control your magical powers is indeed its own form of suffering, and you can have a wild magic sorcerer who chooses to embody that chaos rather than fear it. Warlocks of all sorts can fit within Loviatar circles. The Fiend and Great Old One warlocks in particular exist only to bring pain and suffering with their service. Undead warlocks can use their form of dread to terrify their prey as waking nightmares, and a serrated dagger can be an excellent weapon for a burgeoning hexblade. And finally, wizards, often the most astute of the D&D classes, can embody Loviatar's inquisitive, experimental self. Enchantment and illusion wizards can twist and break the wills of their enemies. Necromancy wizards can engage in blood magic or forcefully raise their victims to eternally suffer their machinations even in undeath, and abjuration wizards can slowly strip away a victim's magical powers, wielding their dispelling powers like a torturer would wield a paring knife to flay skin. Now, for our dungeon masters and our players, whenever you're creating a PC or an NPC who are aligned with or worship Loviatar, here are a couple things that I want you guys to keep in mind. Loviatar is a goddess of pain and believes that strength is derived from suffering. So why does your character agree with that philosophy? Maybe they're a part of a military country where martial strength in service to the state is how you ascend in society. Or maybe your villain is draconian who abides purely by extremes of what it means to be strong and weak, such as a tyrant that the players need to overthrow. Second, Loviatarans show their worship in one of two ways, either by imposing pain onto others or imposing pain upon themselves. So, which one does your character indulge in? Do they self-flagellate and leave their scars exposed in pride for the world to see? Or do they keep their reverence hidden and quiet in order to avoid ostracization from society, hiding their wounds beneath fine clothes and jewelry? If it's the other form of reverence, however, how do they get their victims? And what brand of torture do they enact on them? An enchantment wizard or aberrant mind sorcerer can plague victims with nightmares or prompt anxieties of death and loss, while a rich noble can hire a local criminal guild to kidnap and transport their victims to their secluded summer home for some peaceful, religious flaying. Or, if you want a bit more of a gray line for a PC, perhaps a righteous cleric seeks to return the favor of punishment and desperation to the ruling class for the way they insult, heavily tax, and otherwise abuse their serf populace. There are a great deal of players who love to torture bad guys, so make use of that how you will. All of these can make for great characters that can lead to interesting plot hooks, such as a PC's learning of kidnappings along the road of Ilmater worshippers, or an entire town being plagued by nightmares in the days of a noble's recent arrival, so be sure to keep all of this in mind. A couple of other interesting bits of plot that I've included in my games is the fact that Loviatar is the one who I've chosen to be the creator of vampires. I think vampires are the ultimate depiction of a wolf in sheep's clothing, utterly beautiful, capable of charming anybody that they look at, and sucking blood and hiding the wounds except for two little pinpricks. having a person watch their loved one turn into a vampire and then have them feed upon them is ultimately the greatest form of pain that I can imagine Loviatar has come up with, at least in recent time. There's always more room for experimentation. So as such, I'd like to have Loviatar depicted as a patron goddess of vampires, and as such, upon learning that Loviatar has no distinct knightly order under her, I decided to make one of my own, that being the Order of the Pureblood Knights. These knights mostly are comprised of vampiric members, but they don't always have to, and the predominant feature about them is that they practice ancient old blood magic in a variety of different ways, be it using the blood pouring from their wounds to harden and give themselves some beneficial armor, controlling people via their blood, i.e. bloodbending, and engaging in ancient necromantic rituals that allow them some sort of form of hyper-healing, making them particularly tanky and hard for players to deal with, as well as becoming resistant against things like poison and whatnot. I usually have this order be identified by a crying face with blood spilling out of the mouth and eyes, but you guys can take it and change it however you need to fit your own world. Now, beyond all that, here are a couple of magic items that I would personally recommend for use as rewards in explored Loviatar temples or locations, or items for cultist enemies of Loviatar to use in combat, as well as become loot upon their defeat at the hands of the PCs. When flavoring these items to match Loviatar's aesthetic and doctrine, be sure to lean into things such as using books or cloaks made of flayed skin, or items that require a sacrifice of blood or hit points to use, or even hit die so that way you can get some additional use out of those, and also use designs evocative of body modifications such as piercings, staples, stitches, chains, collars, and so on. Every single one of these items also includes the book that you can find it in. And for our homebrew magic item this evening, we have my own depiction of the white rod itself. Blood flows right off this porcelain white rod, remaining ever free of stains and marks from the pain it inflicts. This item requires attunement and has the following effects upon attuning to it. This rod gets a +2 bonus on attack rolls made against enemies who are not at their maximum hit points, and can cast the Toll the Dead cantrip at will as a bonus action. And lastly, this item has a total of 6 charges, regaining 1d4 + 1 charges every day, and the charges can be spent to cast the following spells without requiring material components. For 1 charge you can cast the spell Hex, for 2 charges you can cast the spell Sickening Radiance, and for 3 charges you can cast the spell Power Word Pain. The DC for these spells is 8 plus your Constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus, or your own spell save DC if you have one, and I've included the item stat block in the description below. And with all that, that's Loviatar, the Goddess of Pain, everybody. I want to thank all you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and press the little bell icon to be notified of future videos. If you guys want to vote on the subject of the next video, there is a link in the description to follow to take you to the polls. And also, let me know what kind of experiences you guys have had with Loviatar on your games, if you made characters to her, if you used her as a villain, and also let me know what kind of content you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.